If you like this podcast, can we recommend another one? It's called Big Picture Science. You can hear it wherever you get your podcasts, and its name tells part of the story. The big picture questions and the most interesting research in science.
Seth and I are the hosts. Seth is a scientist. I am Molly, and I'm a science journalist. And we talk to people smarter than us, and we have fun along the way. The show is called Big Picture Science, and as Seth said, you can hear it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Bytes of Health, where we hope to take a bite out of your parent worries each day with sound advice and guidance. Every morning, we'll answer a commonly asked pediatric question in 5 minutes or less. I'm Dr. Jess Steyer, a public health scientist, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, my amazing husband, Dr. Ethan Chapin, an emergency physician and medical director of urgent care and occupational health. Okay, today we are going to talk about broken bones. The clock is ticking, so let's get to it. All right, Ethan, are you excited to be here?
Very excited. This is much less stressful than being in the ER.
Also, you've been warned, our kiddos are in the other room watching TV, but they keep coming in where we're recording right now, so apologies in advance. All right, first things first, what are the most common types of fractures that you see in kids?
The most common types of fractures are going to be upper extremity fractures, so mostly in the forearm, the wrist, the finger. Kids are top heavy and they tend to put their arms out and their legs tend to bend before they hit the ground, so that's what we see the most. Lower extremity injuries are going to be mostly ankle, possibly the lower leg, much more rarely in the upper leg and the upper arm.
All right, so can you explain the difference between a break, aka a fracture, and a sprain? And can parents tell them apart at home?
It's probably a good idea not to try to make that determination. There's no real physical exam that can determine that. In adults, it's much easier. Adults have harder bones. Kids' bones are more flexible as they're developing. And there are some types of fracture that occur at the growth plates that can be very subtle and really need an X-ray and a good radiologist to make sure you don't miss something like that. So if you have a suspicion for a fracture, it's probably a good idea to get in and get that X-ray. An indication would be if the child's not using the extremity that they injured, for example, not using the hand of an arm injury, not picking things up, and also if they're not walking. Those are clear indications to get in and get an X-ray.
All right, so you mentioned X-ray. So when a child comes to the ER with a suspected fracture, you mentioned X-ray. Are there other diagnostics to assess that there is, in fact, a break?
There are. X-rays are the quickest. It's very low radiation. Please don't worry. It's appropriate to worry, but don't be afraid of the amount of radiation that your child might receive from an X-ray. That shouldn't keep you from taking them in to get the X-ray. There is the potential in kids to use ultrasound to look for fractures. It's becoming much more widespread as we get better training in residency and more experience with it in the emergency setting. Oftentimes, that's all you need is an X-ray and ultrasound. Sometimes we end up going for a CT scan. In rare cases, we could send you for an MRI if we're worried about more soft tissue damage or more significant trauma to the joint.
All right. So in what cases might surgery be necessary for a child's broken bone, and what can parents expect during that process?
Surgery for kids for orthopedic injuries and fractures, as well as sprains. A sprain being an injury to the ligaments of the joint, and the fracture obviously being the injury to the bone. It's pretty rare. Kids heal well. They tolerate these injuries remarkably well. And so it's not common for kids to need that. That being said, it does happen. And probably the fractures and injuries that would require surgery, fractures that if the bone ends up sticking out of the skin, we call that an open fracture or a compound fracture, that could result in a much higher risk of infection, and the orthopedist might want to get them into the operating room to wash it out. If there are injuries to the growth plate that could impact the growth of the bone, that might require surgery for a screw or a pin. And finally, if there's a bad fracture of the joint with dislocation or injury to the ligaments, that could require surgery to make sure that the joint is stable and the child, you minimize the risk for growth abnormalities.
All right, last question, and briefly, are there any long-term concerns that parents should be aware of if their child has suffered a fracture?
If it's treated appropriately, no. Like I said, kids are remarkably resilient. They will grow past these injuries. And for the vast majority, you shouldn't have much concern, again, as long as it's diagnosed promptly and treated appropriately. Injuries to growth plates and joints could have long-term implications for the growth. Again, we are symmetrical beings. We're biplanar. So if you injure one side, especially the growth plate, it could lead to asymmetry. And so the orthopedic surgeon is going to be the one to determine the need for closer long-term follow-up, and they can address those problems if they occur.
All right. Well, I learned something. We hope you learned something, and we have lots more to share. You can get your Bite of Health every day, Monday through Friday. If you like what you've heard here, let us know. Leave us a review on Apple and be sure to tell your friends. Remember, there is no single or best way to parent. Parenting is a journey, and we are all just doing our very best. We wish you happy, healthy, and stress-free parenting.